My name is Sophie, and the day my marriage was priced at $500,000, I finally understood something brutal. In some families, love has a receipt, loyalty has an expiration date, and a wife becomes temporary the moment she stops being useful. $500,000 for my signature. $500,000 to disappear quietly so the Montgomery name could stay polished and perfect while my life cracked in silence. And the cruelest part? I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, only to walk out of that building carrying the one miracle they said I could never give them: a child. It began on a night when rain hit our floor-to-ceiling windows like it was trying to warn me. I was in the kitchen warming beef stew, Ethan's favorite, because even after 5 years, I still believed love meant effort. His phone buzzed on the counter. Once. Twice. 3 times. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Clara. I wasn't a snooper. I was the kind of woman who survived wealthy families by staying polite, staying calm, staying grateful. But when Ethan called from the shower, irritated, "Sophie, can you get that?" my fingers went cold as I picked it up. I barely got the phone to my ear before a shaky voice whispered, "I'm scared." And in the next second, Ethan rushed out, snatched the phone from my hand, turned his back to me like I was furniture, and softened his voice into something I hadn't heard in months. "Calm down, sweetheart. I'm here. Don't cry. I'll take care of everything." The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the tile with a sharp clatter, small sound, but it shattered the whole house. From that night on, everything changed color. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, stopped calling. The family dinners she once demanded became ghosts. My father-in-law, Arthur, looked at me like a worn-out purchase. And Ethan still came home, but like a visitor who didn't want to stay too long. Sometimes the cuffs of his shirt carried a sweet perfume I'd known. I repeated lies to myself until they tasted like truth. It's work. It's a client. It's nothing. But my own ears didn't believe me. 3 months later, my phone rang. Unknown number. The moment I answered, I knew that voice. It wasn't sweet. It was steel. "Sophie, be at the estate at 3 o'clock. My grip tightened. "Yes, Mom." "Don't call me that," she cut in. "You're about to lose that right." Then the call ended like a slap. I stood in the living room of our Greenwich home. Manicured gardens outside, orchids on the shelf, a matching tea set I'd washed until my hands ached, and suddenly everything felt like it belonged to someone else. Like I'd been living inside a staged house meant to impress strangers. Then my best friend and called panicked. "Sophie, it's everywhere. Ethan was photographed going to an OB/GYN appointment with her. She's pregnant." My stomach dropped as I opened the link. The picture was sharp. Ethan's arm around a young woman. A visible baby bump beneath a loose dress. She smiled like a person who already won. And Ethan looked at her with a tenderness that used to be mine. The headline didn't just hurt, it humiliated. Billionaire heir's wife sidelined as husband escorts new partner to ultrasound, expecting twins. I didn't cry. My eyes stayed dry like my tears had burned out that night he called another woman sweetheart. At 2:50, I stood at the iron gates of the Montgomery estate, feeling like I was entering a courtroom. The hedges were trimmed with military precision, as if disorder was a sin. Mr. Henderson, the gatekeeper, opened the gates and looked at me with something close to pity. "Mrs. Montgomery is in the study." The long hallway smelled of old wood and beeswax, but the air felt colder than usual. I knocked twice. When I entered, Eleanor sat ramrod straight in her chair. Arthur beside her, expressionless. On the coffee table, a stack of papers aligned perfectly, like they'd been waiting for me for weeks. "Sit," Arthur said. I sat with my back straight, hands clasped, because in 5 years of being their daughter-in-law, composure became my armor. Eleanor didn't waste time. "You're aware of Ethan's affair?" "Yes." Arthur pushed the papers forward. "Clara is 3 months pregnant." Eleanor's voice didn't tremble. It didn't crack. It sounded like a business meeting. "This family needs a successor. If you can't provide heirs, at least don't occupy the position." The word position hit harder than any insult. Not wife. Not family. A position. A seat that could be reassigned. Then Arthur tapped the papers like he was presenting a purchase contract. Sign the divorce papers, and the family will compensate you. Eleanor added, calm as ice, $500,000. I stared at the number.
To them, it was pocket change.
To me, it was a whole life. But inside those pages were chains. I couldn't speak to the press, couldn't contact journalists, couldn't use the title of ex-wife for personal gain. And then the clause that made my blood go cold. Upon signing, you have 7 days to leave the United States. You may not return for 3 years. I looked up. You want to exile me? Eleanor's answer came instantly. It's for your own good. What would you stay for? To watch Ethan marry someone else? To see them holding twins? Take the money and start over. She called it concern, but I heard the truth. They didn't want me hurt. They wanted me erased.
Cleanly.
Quietly. Like a stain they could rub off their family name. Arthur leaned forward, eyes dark. If you don't sign, we go to court. You'll get no money. And you'll end up with a ruined reputation. Whose side do you think the public will be on? Eleanor finished it with a final warning, like stamping a document. Your dignity is also this family's dignity. Don't make this difficult. I remembered the first days of my marriage, Eleanor taking my hand, smiling, saying, now you're part of the family. And I realized even family had conditions. I asked for 3 days to think. Arthur nodded. 3 days. Not one more. That night, Ethan came home early. Not to fight for me. Not to defend me. To negotiate my surrender. He sat opposite me on the sofa, like a man meeting a stranger. What did my parents say? He asked, pretending he didn't already know. I looked him in the eyes. They offer me $500,000 to sign the divorce papers and leave the country. His silence lasted too long. Silence is an answer. Please don't make this difficult for me, he finally said. That sentence broke something in me because it told me he wasn't ashamed. He was inconvenienced. I asked, am I making it difficult, or did you make it difficult for me? His face tightened, but he didn't deny it. Clara is pregnant. Twins, he said like it justified betrayal. My parents, the bloodline comes first. I asked, and me? What am I? You're my wife, he said quietly. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. If I'm your wife, why did you call her sweetheart? Why did you take her to the OB-GYN? Why did your parents summon me like I'm a stranger signing a sales contract? He tried to twist it. What did you want me to do? Abandon her? Abandon my children? That was when I saw it clearly. He wasn't guilty. He was rearranging blame, so he could sleep at night. I asked him one last question. If I don't sign, what will you do? His eyes flashed with coldness. My father hired lawyers. Don't make it worse. That night, he slept on the sofa. I stared at the ceiling and wondered if my worth had really been reduced to whether I could conceive. I cried silently into a pillow, not because I was weak, but because I finally understood the cruel math of that family. I was an expense they wanted refunded. The next morning I woke with nausea, so sharp it felt like my body was trying to speak over my heartbreak. I told Ethan I was meeting and going to the clinic for tests. He didn't even ask if I was okay. In the waiting room, I watched pregnant women holding their husbands' hands and felt something inside me fold in on itself. I'd sat in clinics like that before so many times, only to leave with the same words. Not yet. I told the doctor my symptoms, expecting nothing but stress. When she returned with the results, she said it calmly, professionally, as if it wasn't going to rewrite my entire life. Mrs. Montgomery, you're pregnant. About 6 weeks. The room spun. 6 weeks. The math hit me like lightning. 6 weeks ago, Ethan was still in my bed. 6 weeks ago, my marriage was still alive enough to pretend. My stomach was flat, but inside me was a heartbeat beginning. A child I'd begged heaven for, arriving at the exact moment everything collapsed. I left the office with the paper trembling in my hand. I found Anne and broke down in her arms, sobbing like grief and joy were battling inside my ribs. What do I do? I whispered and grabbed my shoulders. First, you calm down. Second, you don't tell them. Not his family. Not yet. That baby is yours, Sophie. You don't let them turn your miracle into a negotiation. That night, I reread the divorce agreement again and again. $500,000. Leave the country.
3 years away.
If I didn't sign, they'd drag me through court and crush me with money and reputation. If I did sign, I could protect my child by disappearing before they ever knew. I laid a hand on my stomach and felt something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't just a rejected wife. I was a mother. And mothers learn fast. Peace is not given, it's defended. By morning, my choice was made. I folded the agreement, put it in my purse, and drove to the estate with my back straight and my face calm. Eleanor asked, "Have you decided?" I said, "Yes." Arthur said, "Sign." I lifted my eyes. "I have one condition. Keep the reason private. I leave as soon as the paperwork is finalized. I won't be present for the wedding." They agreed because what they wanted most was silence. I signed. The ink moved like the final period at the end of 5 years. Eleanor examined my signature, gave a small nod, and offered no remorse. No apology. Just relief. I walked out of that house lighter, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I stopped begging for love from people who only understood control. When I handed Ethan the signed papers, I watched his face carefully. And there it was, relief. Not heartbreak. Not regret. Relief. The kind of relief a man feels when a problem removes itself. "Thank you, Sophie," he said, voice rough. I smiled thinly. "You don't need to thank me. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." That night, I packed without help. I didn't carry memories. I carried the future. And came to the airport and hugged me like she was holding my life together with her arms. And when the plane lifted off, I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered, "My baby, from today on, it's just you and me. I can't promise you a life of luxury, but I promise you dignity." London was quieter than the chaos I left behind. I rented a small, bright apartment, learned the rhythm of a new neighborhood, watched strangers with purpose walk to work like life was simple. The money sat heavy in my account, foreign, cold. I didn't feel grateful. I felt purchased. I used only what I needed and saved the rest because motherhood makes you think in years, not days. At my next checkup, the ultrasound showed a tiny flicker on the screen. "There's your baby," the doctor said. I stared, breathless. A heartbeat without a last name. A life that didn't care about reputation or estates or inheritance. I cried on the way home, but the tears were different now. I didn't plan to tell Ethan. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew that family. If they learned, Eleanor would suddenly care, Arthur would suddenly negotiate, and Ethan would suddenly remember responsibility. And none of it would be for me. It would be for what was growing inside me. I wanted my child to be born into peace, not into a tug-of-war between money and ego. For months, I built a quiet life. I worked, I walked, I talked to my belly at night like my baby could already understand. And then one day, the past found me anyway, and called, voice shaking. "Sophie, they know." My stomach turned to ice.
How?
"Mr. Henderson called to check on you." Eleanor overheard. She got suspicious. "They investigated. Sophie, they're planning to come see you." In that moment, fear wasn't for me. It was for my child. Because I knew what they meant when they said grandchild in that family. They didn't mean love. They meant ownership. Ethan called after that, voice sharp, wounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered calmly, because calm is power. "Tell you for what? When you signed me away, you gave up the right to demand my truth." He insisted, "That's my child." And that's when I said the sentence that finally freed me. "You gave up on me, but I did not give up on myself." He tried to scare me with his parents' power, the way people always do when they assume you're weak. "You're alone. How will you raise a child?" I laughed, but it wasn't joyful. It was the laugh of a woman who finally sees the trick. "I will raise him with peace." "You can't buy that." And I won't let you turn my son into your family's trophy. When Eleanor arrived in London, she walked into my apartment like she still owned the air. Her hair was flawless, her gaze sharp, her voice smooth. "You're clever," she said, eyes on my belly. "Getting pregnant and hiding it." I looked at her and didn't flinch. I didn't hide. I left. I was no longer your daughter-in-law. She smiled like a blade. "Divorced or not, the child is our family's blood." That's when I said it, clearly, calmly, with my hand on my stomach. I am the mother. I am the one giving birth. He will carry my name. Her face hardened. She threatened peace, threatened legal battles, threatened resources. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the polite wife trying to preserve harmony. I was a mother. I stood up. "You taught me something without meaning to," I told her. "When you don't value yourself, no one else will. You bought my silence once. You will not buy my child." The fight that followed wasn't just lawyers and threats and letters. It was the slow war of pressure, watchers in my neighborhood, polite intimidation disguised as concern, phone calls meant to shake my nerves. But I learned to answer every trap with the same thing: boundaries. I hired a lawyer. I documented everything. I refused to respond emotionally, because emotion is what bullies feed on. In every meeting, Eleanor talked about what's best for the child, and I answered with the truth they hated. What's best for my child is a mother who doesn't live in fear. Even Ethan, when he tried to plead, couldn't hide his weakness. He wanted to be a father, but not enough to stand up to his parents. And I told him directly, "I don't need words. I need action. And if you can't protect me now, you won't protect our son later." By the time my due date came, I had learned the hardest lesson of my life. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of courage. Labor started in the quiet hours when the city slept, and rushed me to the hospital, shaking more than I was, holding my hand and whispering, "Breathe, Sophie, breathe." The pain was real, sharp, wild, consuming, but every time I thought I couldn't do it, I felt something deeper rise inside me. Not anger, not revenge. Instinct. A mother's instinct. And when my son's cry finally filled that bright room, the humiliation of the estate, the divorce papers, the threats, the money, everything dissolved. They had tried to erase me, but life wrote me back in the strongest ink possible. I held my baby against my chest and whispered, "Welcome, my son. You were never a bargaining chip. You are my miracle." Ethan came later, quieter, thinner, eyes wet. "Can I hold him?" he asked like he was asking permission to touch the truth. I nodded. "You can." He cried as he held the baby, and for a moment, I felt the strangest thing. Not love, not hate, closure. Eleanor arrived after that and stood at the door like her power had finally met something it couldn't dominate. She looked at the baby and her face softened, and she said words I never expected from her. "I'm sorry. I didn't melt. I didn't gloat. I simply gave her the only answer that mattered. Respect my boundaries. Let us live in peace." She nodded slowly. "May I visit sometimes?" I looked at my son, then back at her. "If everyone respects my rules." And for the first time, Eleanor didn't negotiate. She accepted. Now, when I look back, I don't think about the $500,000 as money. I think of it as the price they paid to learn they couldn't break me. They tried to buy my silence, my disappearance, my dignity. They thought a woman without heirs was disposable. They thought exile would erase me. But the truth is, I didn't disappear. I transformed. I became the kind of woman who no longer begs for a place at tables built on cruelty. I became the kind of mother who will never teach her child to bow his head for comfort. If you've ever been told you're too difficult for wanting respect, if you've ever been treated like your love was a contract and your loyalty was an inconvenience, remember this. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is walking away, with your head high, your heart steady, and your future in your own hands. Money can buy silence, yes, but it cannot buy peace. And a family name, no matter how powerful, will never be stronger than a mother who has finally decided, no one owns my life. No one owns my child.